Hi, Sandy. How you doing?
Good, Shanti. I'm great. Thank you.
It's so good to have you here. I am here with Sandy Kusano. I met Sandy through the wonderful world of positive intelligence, which is the mental fitness coaching that we do. She is the head of community there, where she does an incredible job keeping things running, keeping people engaged. And it's been wonderful to experience her there. I was actually connected with her directly through Bill Carmody, who was a guest on episode 12. And he tells a positive intelligence story in action. He caused a fender bender with another person that started with a very irate person on the other end and used his positive intelligence mental fitness skills to end it with a handshake and some laughter. So it's powerful stuff, and it definitely brings Sandy and me together in a lot of ways. Sandy is a human potential coach and podcaster dedicated to cultivating joy as a superpower. Pretty cool. On the coaching side, she does this by empowering individuals to become conscious leaders who inspire positive change. And then on the podcasting side, she's the host of actually two podcasts, the Joyful Optimist podcast, as well as Spilling Our Tea. She has a really fascinating career. She began bartending and waiting tables for about a decade, then landed what would become a dream job, working her way up from entry level to some higher ranks, including traveling the world. And from what she has described, and will tell us more about, it was great and exciting until it wasn't, at which point she traded her dream job for her dream life, which is so powerful. We'll learn all about this story from Sandy, including how her career journey was deeply influenced by her experiences as an Asian immigrant and third culture kid. That brings us to this moment where I can officially welcome you to the podcast. So again, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you. And thank you for that beautiful introduction. It's always a unique experience to hear your life through someone else's voice and lens. It just reminds you of who you really are at times. So thank you for that.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So I did talk a bit about your professional journey. Tell us anything else that you'd like to add or give us a little bit more context around.
I chuckled when you brought up I spent over a decade, I think, working in the hospitality industry, waitressing and bartending, and just how much value that gave me for who I am today. In many circles, perhaps that's sometimes looked down on. I know that even from my family perspective, from the Asian family, they looked at it as you went to college, you got a master's degree, and you're waiting tables and bartending. There was a disconnect there for them. But for me, at the end of the day, as I look back now on my 20s and early 30s of being able to have those experiences, it was really a great learning ground for me to how to relate in the world and with people that I didn't really get from college. I know some people do. I just didn't. And so for me, it was this kind of real life campus, how to live. That's where I learned how to sell, how to cope with difficult situations on my feet, how to work hard, and just appreciating different perspectives of human lives that I probably wouldn't have otherwise been in touch with. So
Yeah.
I just wanted to spotlight that moment in my life. I chuckle, but I look at it also with a lot of endearing memories and appreciation for what I experienced in those years.
That's a beautiful perspective. It's interesting too, because prior to what I'm doing in the world now, I spent a couple decades plus being a sales leader. We found that people who were in the hospitality industry, specifically waitresses, bartenders, made great salespeople because of everything that you just said, right? They really understood how to navigate with people. They could pivot on a dime, and they just brought these real world skills that worked so well in the role. So if you have sales skills, you can apply that in so many ways. I love
Yeah.
that perspective.
That was my first real job, right, was
Yeah.
in sales, and I had to sell myself into it, and those were exactly when they asked me, "Hey, you don't have any sales experience." I was like, "Let me correct you.
Yes, I beg
I
to
have
differ.
a ton," exactly what you had just shared, and they were like, "Oh, we see that now."
Okay, got it. Yeah. All right. What about something that people might not know about you personally, something that lights you up?
I love travel, and it's not just about the going on vacation experience. For me, it's a real immersion into other worlds and cultures. It is my place to escape, but it's also my place to activate as a
Mhm.
human. I think being able to be in different circles and environments, taste different foods, smell different aromas, and hear different sounds really just has always woken me up and opened up parts of my brain to really get creative and to get more insights for myself, as well as understand the world a little bit better and where I am a tiny little speck in it. And I think that came from a very young age. Even some of my earliest memories have been like being on an airplane or in an airport or in a hotel. We used to travel quite a bit, especially my mom and I. And she used to, when we would go someplace, insist that we would take public transportation. She would always say, this is the best way to see a place because you're seeing it from that local perspective.
Yeah.
There's something about that philosophy that I've carried with me into adulthood. And I've been able to travel to these amazing destinations like Mongolia and go back to South Korea and Nepal. And to be able to do it from that lens and perspective of just living in their shoes, I think is the embodiment of how I love to travel.
You know, it can be so easy when we're in our own space and our own routine to get in just a rut that we're not even aware of in terms of how we're thinking and how we're feeling. And it sounds like when you get out into the world in those ways, it just wakes you up. It snaps you out of that brain that can get on automatic pilot and reminds you that there's this beautiful world that's so diverse out there.
Totally. It just shatters everything that I perceive as important. All the little things that tend to bother me or I think is such a big deal suddenly aren't.
Yeah. Beautiful. Okay. What are your pronouns?
She, her.
She, her. And what would you like the audience to know about how you fit into your navigating your career as an outsider story?
I come into that space as an Asian woman, as an immigrant, a third culture kid as well. I came to America when I was quite young and just navigating and juggling, balancing all of those things, the two cultures, East and West, and how that feels, especially in a boardroom, especially in a team setting, can really infiltrate and make differences either in my own head or in how others perceive me.
How old were you when you came to the US?
I was 4.
4. Okay.
4.
So yeah, young.
I came to the country, it was 1977. I would love to share just 2 quick stories of what assimilation or what that immigrant experience might feel like. The first is my own. I still remember at 4 going into daycare and immigrant family, like they never even thought, oh, she doesn't know the language. It might be hard. They just threw me into kindergarten. And so here I am, do not speak the language at all. And so subsequently, kids are teasing and making fun. And in my innocence, I would think that I could speak English. So I would just walk around and say like, blah, 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 and just try to communicate with people in that way. Like that was my English. And I had this one teacher who, ironically, her name was Miss Sandy, and her love and empathy at that time to make sure that I could still follow along and learn. I think that really sticks with me. The difference one person can make in that journey and those small actions. And I would inevitably be teased and bullied to a certain degree and come home crying. And even then, my grandfather would just take me to the playground afterwards and just let me play and kind of wash out the stress from my body. And so just those little bits of conscious care for my young self are still very branded in my adult experience.
Yeah.
And the other story I would like to share is that of my mother. So 1977 again, and she also doesn't speak much English at that time in San Francisco and California. It's not the same level of Asian community as it is today. It still felt very foreign to be Asian when you don't know the language. She started working at a Japanese bank and she spoke fluent Japanese as well. So she was able to get that job. And so she would take the bus to work, and that moment of, I think she said she was on the bus and all of a sudden people were like, what's that smell? What's that? And just noticing the smell. And my mom suddenly realized it was something she had packed in her lunch. We eat this thing, they're pickled radishes and they're delicious. Now I realize, yes, they have a very particular odor, but when you just eat them all your life, you don't realize how strong that smell is. And so So she suddenly realized it was her. And that moment of just panic and shame and guilt, she told me she ended up just pulling the bus thing and getting off at the very next stop and just throwing her lunch away and then walking the rest of the way to work because she didn't have money to take the next bus. Just those kind of pain points of trying to assimilate into a new country. Sometimes the lessons come easy, but sometimes the lessons come so very hard and painful.
The push and pull of what you and your family were experiencing, I think, is really, in a heart-tugging way in some ways, illustrated by those two stories. You're 4 years old. We're all exuberant and excited and learning and curious, and you don't know the language and those types of struggles and frictions happening. How does that start to all unfold for you?
I've learned over the years that my experience, while unique to me, there's a very similar experience that goes across, especially for third culture kids who come into the country and are trying to balance the various cultures. And so as a young child, the priority my family put on me is she needs to learn English no matter what. And along those lines, what happened at that very young age was that they really discounted the relevance of me learning the Korean language. I think up until the third grade, I was in ESL, but naturally, when you're young, language comes easier. By the fourth grade, I was in gifted and talented and very much fluent. But even I remember being like 6 years old and having to be the translator for my family. Like complex matters, right? Rental agreements or picking up the phone and having to translate to adults what grandmother or mom was saying to the adult on the other side and trying to decipher what that adult was saying and translating back. I think that oddly manifested in many ways until adulthood. My almost anxious fear of answering the telephone. I don't like to answer the telephone. And
I
it's
understand
always
that.
that way, right? This pressure. And the other thing that I came to realize in my journey, especially in the last decade, was that I spent most of my life trying not to be Asian. I spent a lot of time and energy really now unconsciously, I realize, to be less Asian and more Caucasian so that I could belong, that I could assimilate, so that life could be easier.
So really pushing down, tucking away who you are in order to
Language.
just fit in.
Yep, the language, the food, how I dressed, how I looked, how my hair was, all these things. And all of it was very unintentional. It just, I think, made sense when you are young. You try to protect yourself
Yeah.
in all the ways that you can, especially when you're a teenager, right? Like fitting in, being accepted by your peers. We're biologically hardwired to get ready for the real world and survive. We now know it, you and I, through our work with positive intelligence. No one really then tells you you can wake up or shed some of those habits. You continue to just keep doing them into your 20s, 30s, and so on into your adult life. And they soon don't serve you in the same way as they did when you're younger. And I had to spend a lot of soul searching and just unraveling and rewriting the story that I wanted to live for myself and who I am and how I show up in the world and claim my Asian heritage.
Do you have an active example of, I have a choice here to show up fully or just push this aside and diminish this piece of me? Or was this all happening unconsciously, really?
I think most of it was happening unconsciously, but I do remember these moments of friction, right? My family would, in a very traditional way, like sleepovers were a very foreign concept to them.
Yeah.
Like, why would you want to go sleep over someone else's house when you have your own house? You're invited and you can't go. Or I would be able to go to the party, but then I would have to come home to sleep at my house. That moment of insecurity and embarrassment. And so then having an excuse the next time that came up. And for me, also, was a lot of rebellion. Studying was the number one priority. Like my job was to study.
Yep.
And so they couldn't understand why I would want a part-time job, why I would want to babysit or go work at the mall, that desire to be independent and make my own money. And they just kept drilling into me. Maybe that was part of the East-West kind of friction point too, is that I would rebel. I would just take the babysitting job, or I would go secretly get a job at the mall. I secretly tried out for cheerleading. What's the phrase? Ask for forgiveness, not permission.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
spent a lot of time doing that, right?
Yeah.
And so I led two lives. I would
Yeah.
live this when I was at school, a very Western, good old California American life. And then I would come home and kept them very separate.
And that is a very big part of many, if not all, of the stories that we wind up sharing here is these two sides to the coin, the separation, just navigating the world from an outsider's place, and the internal confusion that at some point bubbles up around that because you can't be two people, you're one person, and the conflicts that can arise in the understanding of self. There are various directions that you're being taken. And the easiest thing is to just be you and show up, but you can't just do that. There's always something running and saying, okay,
Which me is it?
which me is the best me to show up right now or to interact in this situation? And am I making the right choice? And what feels safe? What feels right? And becomes a decision-making process versus a just showing up process. Does that feel right?
Absolutely. When I began the journey to reclaim who I really am, I really struggled with this concept of authenticity because I realized I don't really know who I am to be authentic. It was a real conundrum. It goes back to what we just shared. I became so good at code switching. In this context, I'll be like this. In this context, I'll be like this. There's a very poignant example. Linguistically, I speak differently when I'm in different audiences. Here I am, I'm speaking to you. It sounds very fluent. No one would, if they weren't seeing a video, wouldn't have a clue that I'm of Asian heritage. It's just only because I say it. But when I'm within my Asian family, when I talk to my mom, I will talk slower. I will talk with a different cadence.
Yeah.
And talk maybe more Asian, or even when I'm speaking English, I will intentionally speak in broken English to my mom to match her speech pattern.
Wow.
And it's odd because I'll catch myself doing it and I'll have this very side internal conversation with myself. Why are you doing that? Is it right to do that? Is it not right to do that? And so sometimes I catch myself being out of presence because I'm like always questioning this
Right.
motive or this habit of mine to do that. But
That's that extra layer we talked about, right? Now I'm going to make a decision about how I show up, how I speak, and that internal dialogue, anything that takes us out of the present moment is a drain. I think back to your mom, that's kind. You're like, this is the way that my mom's going to understand me the best and relate. And it's just another example of the split that one has to navigate through.
And it became so natural and easy. When I am in one space, I avoided bringing in other parts of me as a way to just be safe. Mom only needs to know this part of me, and it will get more complicated for her and for me. I thought it was just a way to protect both her and I if she knew that much. So I only would reveal X amount here. And then the workplace, I wouldn't ever talk about my heritage or what it's like to be a woman or an Asian. And you grow up with this mentality from the Asian perspective, keep your head down and work hard. Don't complain and don't even think, oh, I'm a woman or whatnot. Yes, you are, and it's going to be harder. So you just work harder.
Yeah. You're starting at a disadvantage because you don't fully fit in, so to speak.
Yeah.
Therefore, the remedy is just triple down on effort.
Triple down. Yeah. And it's a very prevalent story. Immigrant families, wherever in the world, you just accept your place, your lot in life. You're starting off not on a level playing field. You
Right.
need to accept that. And then you got to work your way through it.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. So you take this experience of code switching and becomes just the normal day to day and this very, very hard work ethic. And now we start to come into your career. How does that all start to play out for you?
After I left the hospitality industry and I started working in a corporate setting, and I started from the bottom. I started at an entry level job and I was 33 at the time that happened. And it was like a double or triple whammy. You're a woman. I'm 10 years older than the average entry level person. And then my ethnicity. And there was a part of me when I walked into this corporate office where I instinctively knew this is where I wanted and needed to be. But then it's like first day of school, like you walk in on the first day of work and you look around the room and I was like, maybe one or two other faces that looked like mine. And so just scanning the room and feeling, okay, can I belong here? Am I okay? Am I safe?
I have a quick story, and I have forgotten about this. Many of the listeners know that I spent about 10 years actively hiding my relationship with my wife at work. And when I went to my next job, I said, all right, this is it. I'm done. I'm going to be out with it. And to your point, even though that was my mindset, there was one day early on where I went into the kind of the break room, the kitchen, and they have all the HR posters hanging up with all of the fine print. And I very surreptitiously snuck around and read the posters and the fine print about, is this an inclusive environment, to just check that I had made the right choice and that it felt safe to do what I knew I wanted to do. And yeah, I went around and read all the little posters and kind of looked around because I was new and I thought it'd be really weird if people saw me reading those posters that no one reads. But same thing, am I safe? That this was like my quadruple check to say, I'm going to do this thing.
I think that's a beautiful example. We're in new environments. Our human instinct and our purpose is to make sure that we are safe, that we belong. And even when it's not a tiger chasing us down, even when it's just as simple as, is it safe to say who I really am, be who I really am? And that, again, takes a lot of energy and can be exhaustive when you feel like you can't.
Yeah.
And even when you feel like you can, that moment of release, it really makes a difference. And when you are unconscious about that activity that's going on, not just in your head, but in your body, you don't realize that you are potentially always in a reactive mode or a survival mode. When you're working from that space, everything is just a little bit harder, right? Because you're coming from a place where you can't use the parts of your brain and your body that will help you make clear-headed decisions.
Correct. Yeah, that's completely my experience. And I will say, even after I came out at work, my guests have talked about this on other episodes, it's not a one and done, right? So there was tremendous relief and freeing up of energy associated with it. And then there was still this thing that carried over, scanning the room and assessing safety. It just doesn't go away immediately. And there would still be new circumstances, right? My coworkers know, but I'm working with external clients. Should they know? Should they not know? I'm going to be in a social situation. What might arise, right? It unfolds in layers for sure, I think.
Repetitive for sure.
Yeah. You enter this new company, you're feeling good about things, and what happens next?
Shanti, you prefaced it in my bio. I lived and worked a beautiful career. I had this amazing job. I was working in an educational travel company. As I mentioned, love travel. My first kind of study and live abroad experience was when I was 16 on my own, and it really changed the trajectory of how I was going to live. I went from thinking I was going to go to college in California to going to college in Boston and just being more brave and courageous. Being able to work for a company that was doing that for others felt so right. For me, that was an instinctual aha. Of course, I'm going to work here and do something that can help other young lives have a very similar experience to mine, to see the world and experience it in that way. So, and along with it, I was getting promoted and having different opportunities and different learning experiences. And I was thriving. I was really doing well from the context of what I thought was doing well.
Right.
But looking back now, spent a lot of time and energy thinking I had to prove myself. So I remember working like 18 hours, like even longer than I would even work at a restaurant, just going in early and staying really late and making sure that what I was working on was going to be flawless, that it was going to get me the attention and promotion that I needed. And it worked. I did. It was exhausting. And I don't know if it was just the adrenaline or my enthusiasm or just that drive, but I just kept working in that capacity and thinking it was normal. It got me to a place where I got to live and work in London. And again, just like this dream opportunities. I had always wanted to do that. And so it all seemed to be unfolding in the way that I thought was supposed to be. Live your purpose. Every book says, find your purpose and you will be happy. My mom was so proud and happy, and she was telling all of her friends that I moved to England and just showing off. And it just all felt, oh, I finally did it. I finally figured it out. What I really didn't understand was that I was kind of living a lie.
In what way?
On the surface, everything was great, but I was starting to get really burnt out, stressed out. And what came up for me was in my last couple years at that company, I was taking on and doing and making significant positive changes in the role that I was in, and repeatedly was passed over for promotion and financially as well as by title. I
Mm,
was repeatedly reporting into male managers, many of whom would openly say, I know you know what you're doing, so I won't even bother you. Just do your thing. They weren't even there to mentor or help me or be an additive to my experience. They were just
mhm.
there
Yeah.
because someone felt like they deserved it. And I started to feel and see that inequality. And I started to get really pissed off.
So basically, they were saying, well, you're good. You don't need anything,
Yeah, they were like,
which
"Oh, you're so good. You don't." And I'm like, "If I'm that good, why couldn't I have had that position?"
I'm so good, but I didn't get that position. And you're also not mentoring me or investing time or energy in me in any way.
Yeah, I actually spent more time answering their questions and getting them up to speed to, like, what I was doing and why. It just became very frustrating to me that what felt like injustice. Get very riled up when I feel things are unjust. So, it came to a tipping point. I ended up leaving that company and resigning and joining a smaller startup doing the same thing, but being the managing director. And then I thought I really had it, right? 'Cause
Mhm.
I was able to be running a company. I was making double what I was making from the
Mm,
other job. And so again, I had this very superficial, rewarding experience of, oh, I made it. Like now I'm going to be happy. Now I've done it. And what turned out to be the hardest and worst work experience of my life. Like, I
really?
worked for 2 men, the owners, who just I don't know if they knew it, but they were very misogynistic,
Mhm.
talk over me all the time. They would very much discount anything that I was actually bringing, even though that's what they had hired me for. They ultimately felt like they had the best ideas and they knew what was right. It all culminated in a board meeting where I was literally presenting and one of the owners just started talking over me, like noticeably talking over me, to the point where the other board members were like, "Hey, let her speak."
Wow.
And I didn't even get an apology for that ever.
Wow.
And I kind of knew in that moment as I walked away from that day, I had a choice.
It's interesting how those difficult moments can be so clarifying. They're
Mm.
difficult, but the gift in them potentially is the clarity of that just happened and my choice is to accept it or not to accept it.
Yeah. And I really thought about, is this the person that I want to be? Is this how I want to live my life? And that moment of thinking, I can go back to the ways that I've always been taught of just keep your head down and work hard and get through it, which was what my family and everyone was saying. You'll be fine. You can do it. You've done it before. And there was this moment where I had the other voice was saying just internally from the inside, no, you actually don't have to put up with this anymore. If you can release this, there's going to be something else.
Wow.
We don't know what it is yet, but you can. And I was just tired, Shanti, like, my body was tired. I, like, fully had manifested all the symptoms of burnout. I had back pains. I was overweight. My sleep patterns were horrendous, horrendous. I
Mhm.
went to a physical trainer to lose the weight, and we couldn't lose the weight. The overall stress and the cortisol levels was preventing me from having a healthy lifestyle. Now looking back, an interesting time for me to understand that some of the wisdoms that I grew up with just weren't serving me anymore and that I needed to find new ones. I needed to rewrite or reclaim a little bit of both who I wanted to be going forward.
Yeah. I had a couple similar moments for me where, again, physically all kinds of problems. And there was one Thanksgiving, I was in college and I was not a dramatic kid and I just burst out into tears, just uncontrollable tears and shocked my parents, shocked myself. Bottom line is what you said. It gets to a point where you see that I can continue, but it's very clear that if I continue, it's going to be bad. There's just no, it's bad already. It's not going to get better. It's only going to get worse. And you can make other choices for yourself that feel more aligned, that feel healthier, feel more supportive. I relate to that directly. So as you're now starting to rewrite your story, How are you rewriting it? And what would you really want the listener to understand in terms of some takeaways in this new story that you create for yourself?
What I try to teach to my clients and to anyone that will listen is that the wisdom of you is beyond just what's going in your head. Your thoughts are actually probably the least effective way. And so trusting the wisdom that's within all of you. Your body tells you things. Your wisdom lives not just in your brain, but in your heart and in your gut. And those are real. Those are scientifically proven real. And so being able to trust your gut, listen to your heart. Those are phrases that have lasted through generations, and there's a reason for it because there is an absolute underlying truth to that. So I think there is trusting your wisdom and giving yourself space to be in silence or to sit and to reclaim the parts of you that are not in survival mode, that are not reactionary. Wake yourself up to not be an autopilot. I would say for 45 some odd years, give or take, I lived in an unconscious activation. I would have moments of intuition and things like that all throughout my life, but the majority of my life was lived by reactionary shoulds and woulds. And this is not designing my life, just managing circumstances.
Point A to point B.
Yeah. And so the lesson I want to share with your listeners is just the power that you have to rewrite your story.
And what's the role? I know joy is central for you. What's the role of joy in all of that?
The big lie that I grew up believing is that if you lived and worked your purpose, you will then find happiness or joy. And so I have lived my life looking for purpose so that I could feel joy. And what I have now learned is that you have to actually reverse that formula. You have to first be and embody that joy and experience that first. And you will then be able to find purpose and find your ways, right? And joy for me is one of the highest levels of human frequency that we can operate on and vibrate on. It's transferable. It permeates from us. When you are in a state of joy, you can easily transfer that to those around you. It vibrates at 585 megahertz, which is one of the highest frequencies, and it vibrates higher even than love. And so even just simply by being in joy, you can impact those around you. And so for me, that is a superpower. It is also a way where we think joy is something that happens to us, a very reactionary state. And so what I coach my clients to understand is that they can actually activate it. The true superpower of joy is when you are not in a joyful state, how do you get into it? So that you can be more productive and clear-headed and impactful to those around you, especially if you're a leader. And I don't mean leader by title, but leader in anyone that's working with others and having impact or change agent. So whether you're a parent, a teacher, anywhere in your community that you have impact, the way you vibrate and how you show up is first and foremost. So when you can be powerful and know how to activate that when you need it, it not only changes you, it changes others.
That's so beautifully stated. I love what you said about I used to look for my purpose to find joy, and it's the opposite. I need to find joy in order to identify my purpose. And that's like a complete game changer. And the connecting to your joy from the work I think that we both do has a lot to do with connecting back with your kind of your inner essence. Those kind of walls, the code switching, the separation, I'm going to be this person here, this person there. It's no, I'm me, and reconnecting with that person. It all sort of emanates from there.
Yeah. And it's a way to really be present. So letting go of those stories that no longer serve you, of being present to who you are now. When I formed Joyful Optimist Coaching 5 years ago, I came up with the brand and the name, and it felt so right intuitively. And then what I did, Shanti, was I didn't talk about joy nor optimism. I coached entrepreneurs and female entrepreneurs to make more money and grow their business.
Oh, that's so funny.
Because I thought that's what I was supposed to do, but it never really felt right. And only in the past year and a half did I actually reclaim what I had set out to do. And the minute I started talking about joy, the minute I started talking about mental fitness and how to tap into your optimism and your strength, everything changed for me. I loved what I was doing before, but I love
Next level.
And you know how much I love it? I don't care if it's only one person in the room listening. I'll do it. It's
Ah.
not a waste of time. Like, I will just keep doing it. I don't care if there's no one in the room.
Talk about it all day, every
I'll
day.
talk about it all day. And that to me feels like on brand and on purpose and of service. It makes sense to me. And I really truly believe in it. The minute I started saying that this is what I want to do and this is what I want to talk about, and I did it, the opportunities keep coming.
Do the right things for the right reasons, and then things come.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think you've also delved back into your Asian heritage a bit, yeah?
Absolutely. I am just so in love with my heritage. I'm half Japanese, half Korean. I embrace both cultures so much. I've been digging into the Korean language and just relearning it for myself. I cook Korean food practically every other day. You know, my husband, who's not Asian, is more Asian than I am. He loves it more, and I'm so grateful that I have a partner in life who embraces my heritage as much as I do. And in past relationships, because I was hiding that, I never had that appreciation of my culture. And so this is the first time I've actually ever experienced that with a partner. It's so beautiful. He's so curious as to what it is. And I'm so grateful to be able to share and learn alongside him as well.
You light up as you talk about it, and I had this image of kind of weaving together these different parts of yourself, now weaving them together into a beautiful tapestry. That's what I was thinking as you were talking.
Yeah, Shanti. And again, it makes life so much easier, right? I don't have to code switch anymore. I don't have to like pretend I'm this person and then for someone else and then pretend like I'm not for someone else. I started that podcast that's called Spilling Our Tea, where I'm able to sit down with other Asian women who have made impact and have them share their stories so that they can be heard and amplify their stories. So it's
That's
an
so
important
nice.
project to me.
Yeah, paying it forward, but just completely from the heart, not from any sense of obligation.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
It's just a passion project for me. I just do it
great.
because I love it.
That's great. So I'm going to switch us over to the segment of the podcast that I called It's My Podcast. So there will be music.
Okay.
And I'll ask you what I ask everyone, which is if there were one song you could put in a time capsule and preserve at all costs for future generations, what would it be and why?
It's Celebration by Kool and the Gang.
Yeah.
I was actually preparing for something. I'm thinking of an appropriate song, and it's that whisper that comes up. And as soon as I hit play, I just wanted to dance, right? Like just lit up every cell in my body. And it's so simple but catchy. And it just makes me want to get up and dance and to celebrate, right?
Yeah.
And it just is, to me, I think, an important reminder for us all that there is always something to celebrate. Like we don't have to wait for these big milestones in life, and we don't have to hold off on our happiness and joy. You can celebrate every moment of your life. You can celebrate your breath that you're breathing in and out. Celebrate just your surroundings wherever you are. The fact that your cells are just moving, doing their things to keep you alive wherever you are in life, and whatever is coming at you, there's an opportunity to celebrate.
I think there's also an opportunity to celebrate listening to a song that we all know that potentially we don't listen to or fully embody because we've heard it so much, and just listen to it fresh, because there's a reason that song's played at every occasion and that it's stood the test of time.
Yeah, exactly. In the context of why I was looking for it, I'm actually doing a presentation session on failure. And so, why would I put the two together? What I've learned is that when I'm in a point in my life where I do feel down, or when I'm really struggling with something, or I've failed miserably at something,
Because we do, yeah.
because we do, and it's normal. What I celebrate is that I know now when I am in those moments, that is when I grow the most. And that is a huge celebration for me. When I am at my lowest and learning something and finding the lesson, and I look back on my life at all those pivotal moments, I know that that is when I go from A to Z. That's when I start to make these giant leaps. It might not feel great in the moment, but I know that the overall outcome will take me somewhere even greater than what I had thought.
Even back to that boardroom moment, and that wasn't your failure at all, but it was a challenging moment, but it was this thing that just sprung you into this understanding of there's a better way for me. This is not aligned with who I am. So the challenging moments that become the inspirational moments.
And I'll tell you, in that moment, even though it wasn't me that brought it on, I did feel like a failure. I felt like I didn't speak up for myself loud enough in that moment. And there was that voice that says, how did you get yourself here? You did something wrong that put you in this position. Those are the saboteur voices, as we say, our inner critic, and being strong enough to not hear those voices. But in that moment, I really did feel like a failure. Like I did this.
Yeah, that's understandable. And at the same time, there was something in you that said, nope, this is wrong.
Yeah.
I hear you, self, but this is not right. Yeah. As we're coming around to the end of the podcast, where would you like people to find you?
It's really easy. You can find me at joyfuloptimist.com. That's my website. You can also find me on the usual socials, Instagram or TikTok. And I'm on LinkedIn, Sandy Kusano. I'm the only one there, Kusano. So feel free to connect with me. I am building a community on my website, a safe space, a community where we can walk into the room and feel like we belong and have these ongoing conversations.
I'm certain that will be a beautiful, impactful space of sharing and inspiration. So I look forward to following that. Thank you so much for being here. It's been wonderful to spend this time with you and for the openness with which you shared your journey. I'm just back to gratitude. I'm very grateful.
Thank you for the platform. I appreciate you so much, Shanti.
Of course. All right, everyone. That brings this episode of Stories We Haven't Shared to a close. I believe stories are our humanity waiting to be shared, and listening makes it possible. Thanks so much for being here by our virtual campfire today. Until next time, and thanks again so much to Sandy. Take care.